Welcome back, everyone, to another DevCast, where we're going to live DevCast tutorial. Today we have Dan Stoops, who is the Solutions Strategy Director of Marketing Innovation at Genesys, who is going to teach you how to build a Google Rapid Response virtual assistant with Genesys Cloud. It's going to be very exciting, and the flow is going to be slightly different than usual, and we hope that you like it. So without further ado, or rambling, Cliff Bell, do you want to introduce Dan for us?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Cliff Bell. I'm the Director for the Marketing Innovation Group, and I'll be watching the Q&A pretty closely. So if you have questions, you can throw your questions in there. We'll try to get them answered. So we have Dan Stoops, he's the lead marketing innovation engineer, and Dan has literally decades in the artificial intelligence space, both in terms of leadership and in terms of experience. He has lots of firsts, lots of patents. He has been involved at the very cutting edge of async messaging. He did the first Apple Business Chat integration from a Genesys perspective, and many other firsts. Dan's a blast to listen to, so I hope you guys all enjoy the DevCast today. So I'll turn it over to my friend, Dan Stoops.
Great. And Cliff, do you see the GCare screen here to start out with?
I do. Yep.
And it fills the screen? Good. So I just learned today, everyone's learning things new. I just learned today that I've got to learn conversational Spanish within a month. Ali has put a challenge out there that we do DevCasts in Spanish too. So let's see if I can pick that up. But what I want to do today is show you a rapid response bot built with Genesys Cloud and Google. And I was thinking about the word rapid, like why is the word rapid so important here? And it's in many dimensions. Number one is that we're going to go pull the information for our rapid response bot from Google. So Google's going to be supplying a lot of information. So literally in minutes, our bot will go from knowing nothing to knowing almost everything about COVID-19. But a second way of using rapid is that we're going to build this in 45 minutes. Now I'm an expert, so at home might take you a little longer, but I wouldn't think it'd take you that much longer, maybe a day, to get through the same process that I'm doing, but I'm going to do it in 45 minutes. But the third thing about Rapid that I really like is we're going to show how you can change the answers of the bot in moments. And that's where I think Rapid is really exciting, because when you're building a bot for a customer, for a company, in the past, we would say things like, let's take months and build a bot to automate some process. Maybe it's banking or change of address or whatever that is. Let's take months and really study this and build it. Well, in this new world that we're experiencing right now, our company bot may change in a day. In Ohio, where I'm from, where I'm at right now, the governor comes on every day at 2 o'clock and tells us what the new regulations are for our companies. Can we be open? What's social distancing? How many people can you put in a building? So imagine every day as a company like GCare, I've got GCare on the screen here, they're a medical company, that every day they're watching at 2 o'clock what the governor says the rules are, and they've got to update those rules in their system so their bot can respond correctly. That is a word, rapid, we've never used before in contact centers, and that's what I want to show you, because we can respond to this, we can be a part of all that. What I'd like to do is start out by showing you the end result. What is it like to have a chat experience with a rapid response bot? On GCare, on the far right-hand side here, I've got our COVID-19 chat. I'm going to pop this up. I'm going to join it. And we get a little welcome to the COVID-19 Information Center. And the first thing I'll ask is how long does it take before I show symptoms? I can make typos, I can make mistakes. Still, we're going to do natural language understanding. And this is an answer from Google, the company, from the World Health Organization as a source, saying 1 to 14 days. And this information came from a very interesting, trusted source. So that's pretty cool. But here's the twist. As a company like GCare, most of the people coming to my site are not asking COVID-19 questions. They're asking, how does COVID-19 impact my company? So specifically, can I visit my wife, who perhaps is in a GCare facility? So I'm going to ask, can I visit my wife? This is a question not about COVID-19. It's a question about GCare. And they're saying, well, right now we have these kinds of patients, these kinds of visits, and few exceptions. Well, that's not really helpful for me because this is something that's very important to me about visiting my wife. So I might say, I need to talk to a human. So I need to talk to someone because I really want to visit her and I'm not sure I understand what's happening. So when we do that, we're going to an agent and I'll make myself eligible. And here we get the escalation. Let me bring that up. So I get, wow, lots of people are talking to my workflow in Spanish as well. And this is all the chat information that I have. My goodness, about what's going on with me. So I said, how long before I show symptoms? Can I visit my wife? I need to talk to someone. So other people are actually on the website as well. And here's someone in Spanish, and they're trying my bot live. So this is, you can tell, a live demonstration. All right, so what do? We asked a question about COVID-19. We asked a question about the company, and we escalated to an agent, and they got all the information about that. So I can respond, I can help you with that. All right, and we'll go back and we'll see that responding back in our desktop here. Okay, good. So that's phase one. Now we know what we're about to build. And Cliff, I know you're monitoring some of the chat questions. If anything pops up, feel free to hop in the meantime.
Well, we do have one. We have had a couple, but we have one that's related to, I think this probably looks ahead, but it looks like this is just designed for chat. Are we going to cover voice, or is it the same for voice? Are we covering both today?
That's a really good point because we have built a Google Dialogflow bot to support both chat and voice. So I'm going to spend about a half an hour here showing you all the connections. And these connections are as valid for chat and for voice. At the very end, I will convert my chat bot into a voice bot in under 5 minutes. So it does handle both.
Perfect.
All right. Now, what does this look like? What are the elements that we're talking about? Let me kind of bring this up to show you here. So here we're choosing a chat channel. We could choose a voice channel, whether it be chat or voice, it's going to look nearly the same because we're going to direct that conversation into Google Cloud. I'm sorry, into Genesys Cloud. So now Genesys Cloud has this connection. And the point of that is to essentially take the chat dialogue with the customer or the voice dialogue with the customer and point it to Google Dialogflow, much like pointing a fire hose at something. So we got a fire hose of voice or a fire hose of a chat stream. We're pointing it at Google Dialogflow. We're saying to Google Dialogflow, to this dialogue agent, they're called, you've got this conversation. You run with it. You do whatever you need to do for as long as you need to do. And when you're done, you hand the conversation back to us. And when you hand the conversation back to us, you might say, this customer has everything they need, hang up on them. Or as a Dialogflow entity, you might say, well, this customer needs help with a person, so transfer to an agent. So really, Genesys has the ability to direct the entire conversation to Dialogflow, but then when that conversation comes back, either to end it, to send it to a different chatbot or something, or to escalate to an agent. Now, on the right-hand side of this, what I find really exciting is this discussion of the word rapid. So think about Dialogflow as being what we call as intents. Intents are, what is your customer trying to do? Are they trying to learn about COVID? Are they trying to visit their wife? Are they trying to schedule surgery? Are they trying to cancel surgery? These are all the questions, the intents. But the answers can come from a content management system. We'll see that in a couple of minutes. So think about the difference between the questions that are being asked and the answers that are being given. Technically, we show that as being two different parts of the solution. But within your customer company, within your enterprise company, like GCare, they're going to have it as two different departments. There's one department who understands what the customer wants to do. There's a different department who understands the answer to that. Because again, the answers may change every day at 2 o'clock, like they do here in Ohio. And the answers may have to be reviewed by an entire department. They may have to be approved by a different department. So the process by which we review answers can be very different from the process by which we determine what questions the customer is asking. All right. So the next thing is, how do we actually make this connection between the chat, Genesys Cloud, and Google? So let's take a look at the widget setup. And what I'm going to do is pop up the code that allows us to do this. And I know this is a little bit small here, but it really comes in in 3 sections. So the first section is on your company website. There's a little bit of JavaScript code you got to put there to include the Genesys widget. So that whole GUI that I showed you where I'm chatting and the bot's chatting back and it's black and white text, really, really pretty, hanging off on the right-hand side here. These 2 lines of code bring in the styling for that and the actual code for that. That's JavaScript code running on your company's website. Now, the second thing we've got to do is connect that JavaScript code to our specific instance of chat within Genesys Cloud. So we have a deployment key, an organization key. And I'm going to show you where those come from and how we wire this up. But essentially, I've got to put these 2 values into my website to make this connect up. And then I just start it. I say start, watch, and when someone clicks on that link, do something. Now, the right-hand side is what happens when we actually do start all this up. We're going to go through a flow, which is the Genesys Cloud way of saying, what should we do when someone chats with us? We're going to go through a flow. And that flow essentially says, welcome, turns the fire hose onto Google Dialogflow, which can entertain the customer for minutes if needed, and then eventually either disconnect or upgrade this to an agent interaction. All right. So let's delve in and see how all this is done. Here is the website where Genesys Cloud describes this entire widget configuration. So the code I was just showing you. So if you go into the Development Center and take a look at all the widget code, this is what you're going to go put on your website. But what is your website really connecting to? And let's take a look at our Pure Cloud Genesys Cloud Administration Center. So if I've got a website ready to talk to Genesys Cloud, what is it talking to? And it's talking to a widget. So what is a widget? I've got lots of widgets defined here. I'm going to create a new widget. I'm going to call it Test COVID. So this is the endpoint that my website is talking to. I'm going to choose version 1.1 if I'm not using Alta Cloud. And I get to pick a flow, which is what is the chat actually talking to. So let me let's go ahead and pick one, my COVID flow, and hit save. Now what's going to come back is the code that I'm going to put on the website. So we just saw on the website the JavaScript code that says I need a deployment key or an org ID. So we take these 2 values, we put them in JavaScript on our website, and now our website GUI can talk to our Genesys Cloud. That's it. That's the connection that's needed. I'm going to pause here for any questions because now I'm going to talk a little bit about flows that support these widgets.
Yeah,
I can tell the crowd here is engaged. Go ahead, Allie.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to make sure that if anyone has any questions, is confused, whatever, speak up, and we'll just want to make sure that you're following all the milestones. What were you going to say, Cliff?
Well, there's a somewhat ambiguous question here. It's how long is this going to take? And I think what they mean, Dan, is
when will this end?
So I'm going to do a little interpretation. I'll do a tiny bit of interpretation. If I was starting with all of my sandboxes in place, how long would it take me to stitch all these things together that you're showing me?
So literally an hour. If you know what you're doing and you have all the sandboxes, an hour. I would give yourself a day, but it takes me an hour to do this. For a company who says, I want a rapid response bot from Google in Genesys Cloud.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So we set up our web page to talk to our widget with these connections here. And our widget talks to a flow so we can actually decide what to do. So let me go here and create a new flow. And I'm going to call this the test flow. Create this. And the trick when this comes up, good, is how can I edit this so it supports my system? So I'm just going to delete some of these things I don't need here. I'm going to start from scratch. Just kind of watch me delete this. And now I've got an empty flow. And the first thing I can do is welcome the person chatting. So welcome to COVID-19 chat, right? That's the first thing that the customer's going to see. This really is your moment to brand with the customer, to identify with them, to help them understand what they're doing with this chat. Now, the next thing is, how do I direct this entire chat stream or voice stream to Google? And we do that with a data block called Connect Dialogflow Bot, right there. And over here, I get to go pick a Dialogflow agent to support this. This is a huge step. Let me just explain the elegant nature of the step. What we've done is we've created a mechanism for the customer to start chatting with our company. That's what we did in the last 10 minutes here. And now we're saying, point that entire chat conversation to Google. And eventually, either the Google Dialogflow is going to say, I need help and I need to transfer it to an agent. Well, great, let's send it to an agent. I've got a queue of agents here called bot support. Or the Dialogflow bot is going to say, we're done, and let's just say goodbye and hang up on them. Right? We're going to disconnect. So this block right here, this one block here, is the most powerful block because it is directing the entire conversation now over to Google. And we can put in a little failure response here in case something happens. In this case, I'll just say, oops. All right. So that is a big, big connection. And I'll pause here for any questions because this is the key of connecting Genesys to Google.
Dan, it looks like you have a question. Where is the Google agent defined in Genesys Cloud? The integration section?
Yeah, so what's the connection between Genesys Cloud and Google?
No, Maria, I see that you also raised your hand, so we'll get to that question next. Where is the Google agent defined in Genesys Cloud? Like, is it in the integration section or? Yeah,
there's kind of two ways of describing where it's defined. So the Google Dialogflow agent is defined in Google land, which is Dialogflow land. In fact, this is the tab we're going to go to in 2 tabs. But specifically to your question is, how did I make this connection here to recognize that I have a Dialogflow agent called COVID-19? And that is done in, as you mentioned, the admin section. So we had an admin widget to connect our chat into Genesys Cloud. We also have an admin integration to connect Google Dialogflow into Genesys Cloud. So essentially, you can go to your integrations area, search for Dialogflow, and there it is, and you would install that. I already have mine installed, but it's simple as installing that. And once it's installed, you go and open up, I'm going to edit mine, the definition, and under configuration, under credentials, is how the two communicate. 2 sections here. Okay, so the question is, how do you make these connections? And we do have an entire resource center page dedicated to that. So essentially, how do you connect Google Dialogflow into Genesys Cloud? And there are 2 sections to that. So the first section is, how do you get credentials so that you can essentially access Google? But then there's the flip side. How do you get credentials so Google can access back into Genesys? So let's take a look at this one first. Essentially, we need to know the client ID and the client secret of a connection back into Genesys. And we do that over here in OAuth. So we can create a client or add a client. I have one here called COVID test. And when it comes up here, we'll see that it is the client credentials of the different grant type. Ours is called client credentials. So essentially, when you create a new OAuth integration and choose client credentials, you'll get the client ID and client secret that allows Google to communicate back to Genesys. You do have to pick 2 roles, admin, I think, and employee have to be enabled. And once you do that, you get these details. And you put these details right here in this configuration credentials. So They kind of match, client ID and client secret. So Google can talk to Genesys. But on the other side, we need Genesys to be able to talk to Google. Let's take a look at that. Essentially, we need a client ID, a client email, private key ID, and a private key. Where do you get that? You get that from Google Dialogflow. Let's open that up. I've got an agent right here. And if you go into the configuration of that agent and you go to the service accounts. So this is my Dialogflow account where I've got all my intents and everything. And if I go to the service account of that, what I can do, and make one more connection here.
Dan, we've got questions queuing up. Lots of excitement.
All right.
Yeah, and
So I'm going to.
Maria also. Someone raised their hand. But sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to create a service account here real quick, and I'm going to call this the Genesys Cloud. Right. I'm going to create it, and I'm going to add a couple of roles, which I need to add here. Dialogflow client and Dialogflow reader. Continue. And I'm going to create a key for this. This is the important part. Is when I create a key in Google Dialogflow, I'll create it. I'm going to download it. And I'm going to open it. Let's see here. Yep. What we have here is client ID, client information, private key ID. Okay. So let's go back to our, let's go back to, there we go. Hang on a moment here. I lost my, where'd it go? Yeah, there it is. So get this out of the way. Come on, there. So in my integration, I need 4 values, and those 4 values came explicitly from exporting that key within Google Dialogflow. So I know that was probably like the most boring 5 minutes of your life, but that is the huge connection between Genesys Cloud and Google Dialogflow. And what's really important about that is that it handles all the authentication. It used to be last year or 2 years ago, the connections between our systems were what IP address are you going to? What port are you going to? What authentication keys? Just endlessly complicated connections. But with Genesys Cloud and Google, it's as simple as creating a service account and sharing the credentials of that service account into Genesys Cloud. And now my Genesys Cloud account can view my Dialogflow system. All right, sorry, subjected that to you, but it's recorded for posterity. What were some of the questions?
That's great. No, so one of the questions was, is one Dialogflow integration required per bot?
No, that's the neat thing is that one credential integration is required. So in Google Dialogflow, I've got to give a credential set to Genesys Cloud. And then from that credential set, I can share many different bots within Google Dialogflow. So essentially, you take those set of credentials and you apply them to as many agents as you want. You can have 5, 10 different agents all under that one credential. Now, what's difficult though is that if Cliff has a set of bots and I have a set of bots, we now have to have a common credential key between us to share for me to see both my bots and Cliff's bots.
Great. And we had one other question that Jim actually answered in the chat, but it was related to the difference between the way Lex flows work and the flows that Dialogflow enables with the intents exposed in the conversation flow. So I think, Julie, you had your question answered there, but they do operate a little bit differently in terms of what's exposed in Architect.
Yeah. And one of the really neat things about that is I'll just bring up one of these intents and show you kind of at the very bottom here, is this idea of, does this intent end the conversation? This is a really interesting thing if I turn on or off. Essentially, when I was saying to you that we're pointing an entire fire hose of voice or a fire hose of chat to Google Dialogflow, so Google Dialogflow will maintain ownership of that fire hose of voice or chat until it says it's the end of the conversation. This could go on for minutes, it could go on for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Eventually though, if you as a customer say and activate an intent that is the end of a conversation, then control comes back to Genesys Cloud and we'll do whatever's appropriate at that point. Escalate to an agent, say goodbye, or send you off somewhere else. All right, good. So now what I've got over here is my agent. So we went from my flow, which is calling a Dialogflow bot, which is pointing to an agent. This is in Genesys Cloud, into Dialogflow, where I have my agent. And I'm going to create a new agent. I'm going to call it test COVID. To just be safe. No white spaces because I would just confuse everybody. And yeah, let's try that again. Creating a brand new agent. And I probably have too many agents. Okay, here I've got a brand new agent called test A. Nothing in it. When you create a blank agent, it really has two things it can do. It could welcome you, which is kind of nice. So if I say hello over here, I'm testing my agent. I'm gonna come back and say good day, what can I do for you? And if I type anything else, like I want pizza, it's gonna come back and say, I don't know what you're talking about. Now, how do we go from a blank agent rapidly into an agent that can do a lot? And one of those is through Google's rapid response virtual agent. I'm on the website here that talks about how to build a virtual agent using Dialogflow, which of course Genesys connects to. And down here is a COVID-19 virtual agent template from Verily, which is Google's health organization. Right. Let's go take a look at that. And that brings me up to GitHub. And in GitHub, I can download the template for this new agent. Let's go ahead and do that. And I'll save it. Good. Now I can go back to my empty agent and I can import and it's on the desktop here. Type import, because this is actually a pretty destructive thing if you already had things defined. Type select import, and now it's pulling in all of the definitions of intents from Google for my brandy new agent. And look at that, I now have what, like 80 different intents about coronavirus. Right? So one of the things I was asking is how long take for symptoms. Okay. Hang on, let me make sure I get that question right. How long does it take before I show symptoms? Okay,
Dan, the
so
audience is
1 to
counting
14
your
days.
misspellings.
Yeah, I know. I don't even try to spell anymore.
They're actually up to like 12 or something like that. Carry on.
Just wait till I do it in Spanish and see if they, how many misspellings I do there. What's the NA key? I didn't know there was a key that did that. So I imported these intents and I immediately now have a bot that can answer COVID-19 intents in just minutes. That's pretty impressive. But wait, we can do more than that. What I want to do is create a brand new intent. And I'm going to call this one GC-visitor, right? And what that is an intent that is beyond the Google intents. I'm prepending it with the letter GC because we're going to see in a moment how we can filter intents based on their names. So I can segregate the COVID-19 intents versus my company's intents. And so the training phrase would be, can I visit my wife? Right? And then I get to put in a response, which is, I don't see why not. Let's save that. So if I go back to all my intents, I have all these intents plus the visitor intent. So now if I ask, can I visit my wife? I get the answer. What did I type wrong? Can I visit my wife? Save. Can I visit my wife? Can I visit my wife? I don't see why not. So we see two things happening here. One is the pure power of me being able to go in and create new intents in moments that'll be effective all the way through the bot, all the way through the end point where my customer's chatting with me. But we also see the responsibility, which is, should a bot developer who admits that he's been sheltering in place for over 2 years now really be responsible for the answers of this company? And my opinion is no, probably not. Because as a bot developer, I really don't know the answer. And in truth, since every day at 2 o'clock, the governor changes the answer, this is a problem. So how can we solve this? How can we separate now the difference between our intents and our answers? And let's just look at a little bit deeper, because if we go look at an intent about incubation period, here are all the different ways customers can ask questions. What's important about that is your bot will grow in time and in strength as you see more and more questions from customers. So essentially, when the bot doesn't understand a question, it's usually one of two reasons. Either we don't have that intent at all, which we really got to think about. If the customer is asking a question that we completely don't understand, how are we going to address that as a bot developer? Versus the customer is asking a question and we understand the intent. We just have never seen anyone ask it that way before. Well, we've never seen them ask it that way before. We just type in an extra phrase. Instead of how long is the incubation, how long does it take to show symptoms, right? Maybe that was a new one that we hadn't caught before. Boom, it's in there. I hit save and my bot has become stronger. But when it comes to the answers for Genesys Care, let's look at a content management system for that. So here I am in Shelf. You can learn about Shelf in the partner portal in the App Foundry. And here I've got all the different collections of intents that apply to us as a company. Our classes canceled at Genesys Care, medical classes, health classes, our fitness centers, are they open or not? In fact, they might be opening today at 2 o'clock if the governor says yes. Gift shops, are they closed? So we have a question about visitors. And here I've got two different values, restrictions and exceptions. And here is the answer to the question of, can I visit my wife? So how do we link the question from Google to the answer in Shelf? And I'll show that through fulfillment. But are there any questions about that before I get into fulfillment, or about where we are?
We do have a question here about how variables are passed from Dialogflow back to Genesys. And I think what you're going to cover now is CMS to Dialogflow.
Yeah, so there's really, so variables are interesting. There's variables in the sense of fulfillment. Like if I say how much money is in my banking account, and the answer comes back $26. So that's one kind of variable being passed back. But the other are slots. So think about this in 3 layers. First, if I say how much money is in my checking account, my intent is basically how much money. That's kind of the intent. A parameter is checking, because I could have said savings account. So how much money is my checking versus how much money is my savings account? So first of all, what's the intent? I'm checking my balance, looking at my balance. Number 2, what are the parameters, which is my checking? How much money is in my checking account? And the third is, what's the actual value? Because fulfillment may come back and say the value is $57. That's all being passed back into your flow as values that you can access and either make routing decisions or speak back to the customer or send to an agent. All right, now what I want to show you here is how do we go from, I'm going to bring up my COVID bot here. How do we go from questions and intents to fulfillment? And that is done through the fulfillment tab. And here I have a URL, which is a website. And what this website is the bridge between Google Dialogflow figured out what the question was, what the intent was, and the answer is in Shelf. So if I go to one of my intents, I'm going to type in GC here, and I want to know about visitor exceptions. Down here at the bottom, I can say the response either comes as text or the response comes from fulfillment. I want my Genesys Care answers to come through fulfillment. So I say I'm going to use a webhook for that. I look at my fulfillment. This is the webhook right here. And then I can go take a look at the code. And I'll do that by moving this out of the way. Down here. I've got the code right here. So here's the code that supports the connection between Dialogflow and fulfillment, content management system in Shelf. What I do is that when my code is called, my website is code, I have to get the contents of the call and I parse it. So this little section of code right here says, let's figure out what the intent was for this fulfillment. So Google Dialogflow calls my website gets the intent out of all this information that was sent to me. And then I turn around and I go to the Shelf content management system and I send into it the intent. I said, look, here's my query. Here's my intent, which is visitor exceptions. What do you have as an answer to that? I get the answer back from Shelf. I read that in, I parse it out, and I take the detailed section, which is the text, essentially. I take the text out of the answer from Shelf, and I send it back to Dialogflow. So under 69 lines of code allows me to be the bridge between my agent in Dialogflow and my content in my content management system. And I just want to stress that really helps you be a rapid response system by having the content come from somewhere else. All right. So rounding up our demonstration is, let's go back to our widget here, open it up, and say, can I visit my wife? And we're going to see the answer come back and say, in an effort to protect our patients. So now let's go to Shelf and open this up. In an effort to protect our patients, and now I'm going to say, this is Thursday, and I'm going to hit save. Right. So I went into my content management system, I changed the answer, I go back to my chat, and I ask the same question. Return, comes back and says Thursday. That is, I'm sorry, I'm really proud because I went through the whole demonstration and it worked. It works every time, but you know, when it's live, there's always a higher risk. But that is a rapid response bot where it knows COVID-19 and Genesys Care that can be changed in a heartbeat. But wait, there's more, because there was a question about how do I turn this into a voice bot? And I'm going to do that in under 5 minutes. So I still have time for a question or two here. Cliff, is anything popping up that needs to be answered?
There was one question about the necessity of putting in every single training phrase live, having to type it in, or if there was a way to feed in training phrases automatically. And so yes, obviously you loaded it in the JSON bot, but how would you answer that, Dan?
Yeah, so there's really three good ways. One is that you can look at a previous corpus, we call them corpus, which is collection of data. So if customers have been chatting with your company for 2 years, you've built a number of questions that you can load in as a JSON object into Dialogflow. So that's kind of one way, and that's focused on intents. But the other is called a knowledge base. And that's a feature where you can literally just take documents or actually scraping an FAQ website. So if we load documents into our knowledge base, then Google will go and match those documents to get questions and answers out of them. My preference is to build your bot completely out of intents, but don't dismiss the knowledge base for being able to support all that. It's very powerful. All right, now I'm going to go over here and
one
go back
more
to
question
Architect.
while you go over there.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you,
Yeah.
because I think you can do both at once, but there's a question about sharing sample code too. Particular interest in the sample code for parsing the shelf response.
For parsing the what, I'm sorry?
The shelf response back into Dialogflow.
Oh yeah, yeah, and so definitely sharing code. And the real advantage of this is JSON is JSON, JavaScript something, is the defined standard by which we really communicate. And there's some really, really good libraries in parsing out JSON. It's almost in every language, just a couple of lines of code. So stick with JSON as your communication standard, and you'll go a long way. And definitely we can help share that. This is something I do literally on a daily basis. So it's good stuff. All right, now I'm going to create an inbound call, and this is COVID voice. Now you saw me create an inbound chat flow, which was how did we connect a chat widget into this fire hose of information. Let's create the voice equivalent, right? Now there's a little trick here to do, which is when we come in, the first thing we see is a main menu. So most of our voice flows tend to be IVR, press 1 for this, press 2 for that. What we're going to do is create a task, and you put it down here in reusable tasks, and then you make it, where is it here? Oh, where'd you go? Yeah, and so now I have this task, and in the task, I can drop my Dialogflow bot. Now, because I made the integration on the chat side, essentially there's one integration between Genesys Cloud and Dialogflow. So because I made that integration, I can go over here and I can grab my COVID-19 agent. And what a coincidence. Just like in chat, we have the ability to escalate this to an agent or essentially say goodbye. If I want to escalate to an agent, I'm going to do that by, where is it here? Transferring to my bot support queue, or I can just at the very end disconnect, right? So either I'm going to escalate to an agent or I'm going to disconnect. And I got to put some little things like to an agent to make it happy, and oops, in case it doesn't work. And I can save this and I can publish it out. So just like we saw in the chat version, connecting a chat or voice bot in Genesys Cloud is this block. This is the block. Now think about it. Beforehand, I could play lots of welcome messages and stuff like that. Afterwards, I could do lots of decisions. Should I go to an agent? You could treat customers differently based on where they're coming from, what time. So there's a lot of power in these flows. But what I'm showing you is the one block that connects this fire hose stream of voice into Google. But in order to make that happen, for chat, we created a widget. For voice, we create a call routing. So I'm going to add a new call routing, and we'll call this one test COVID voice. And it has to go to a flow. Let's see, so I must not have published this guy yet. Publish it. And once this is published, I can go back into my admin screen, and let's just start that over. I really do not type very well. And I don't know where it went, but we'll go to this one for now. And to this connection, test COVID voice, I'm going to add a phone number that I've already purchased. Well, add and save. So now that has connected my phone number to a flow, and that flow has within it a connection from Genesys Cloud to Google Dialogflow. So let's call into that. I've got that here on my phone, and I'll put it on speakerphone.
Welcome to G-Care. How can I help you?
Can I visit my wife?
Thursday, in an effort to protect our patients, physicians, and staff from COVID-19, G-Care no longer permits patient visitors at any G-Care hospital, with few exceptions.
And Cliff, could you hear that?
Yes, we could.
And could you hear the word Thursday?
Thursday, yes.
At the very beginning, Thursday. So essentially, I took my entire chat-based system, converted it into a voice-based system by getting a phone number, a call routing, and connecting it to a flow that points the voice fire hose to Dialogflow, just like we pointed the chat fire hose to Dialogflow. So that is what I really wanted to achieve here, was to, in under an hour, show you how to create a chatbot, rapid response, Google Dialogflow that had imported many, many COVID-19 intents along with specific intents for my company, and then turn right around and make that a voice flow as well. And always remember that when you're doing chatbots and voice bots, that escalating to an agent is a really important part of that, because when you escalate to an agent, you're bringing that human touch, blended AI, and also bringing along with it all that happened with that customer prior to their interaction with the agent. So I'll pause here and ask for any questions.
Dan, it looks like Julie has a question about making sure that, how do we make sure that data is not used by Google Cloud AI Master for data privacy? I know there's a logging setting. Turn off logging. What is the impact on the bot's capabilities?
Yeah, I don't mean to minimize that question. I can tell you that is over my head. I don't know that at all. I could just tell you that I use it and I love it and it's very, very powerful, but I don't have answers to that. Great, good question though. That's one I can answer in Spanish.
No,
no comprende, señor.
Earlier, we were talking about the Spanish. Currently, it was not Spanish, but we're getting questions in the chat. It looks like Mark said, if you turn off logging, you cannot see the history and dialogue for tuning. Julie, I hope that that's useful information for you. We also question, is it possible to use Pure Cloud Real Agent questions responses as a learning-based dialogue flow?
That's a good question.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's exactly. I think you want to look at both sides of that coin. So one is, what are the questions that customer are asking? And then what are the answers that agents are allowed to give? So yes, I think it's a really good point.
Good. And
in fact, I wanted to share with you.
Here. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I'll just share with you a quick story, which was we used this setup in the Experience 19 show, which was in Denver last year, 2019. And what we found is we went into the show with about 60 intents. These are 60 questions that we thought customers might ask us at our big yearly show, Experience 19. We ended the show with 260 intents. So essentially, we learned over 3 days about ideas we'd never had any no, I have no idea if people are going to ask us these questions. So essentially, the more that your agents are aware that they can influence the bot, I don't mean by the agents actually changing it, right? But if the agents can say, I'm seeing the same questions over and over again, couldn't we be handling this with artificial intelligence? The more that they're aware of it, then the more your intents can grow. And that's how we grow our intents from 60 to 260, which is letting our support agents know they can delegate these to a bot and never have to answer the question again.
Dan, I think there needs to be some clarity. So Carlos is asking if there's any cost for Dialogflow App Foundry. Carlos, I'm not entirely sure how to
Hey, Ali, I can answer that. This is Jim. So Carlos, if you go to the App Foundry and find Google Dialogflow there, you'll see a free trial button. If you click that, it's going to ask you to log in, and that would be logging into the org you plan to deploy it to. It will not deploy right away. The login just logs you in, and then pricing will become available. You can click the pricing tab and see the rates. The reason you have to log in and into the org is pricing can vary for certain App Foundry products by region. So we need to figure out what region that org is in. I don't know if Google Dialogflow is that way, but the pricing won't show until you log in.
And to build on that, Dan, right now, or Jim, right now there's a campaign going on where Genesys, obviously from a rapid response standpoint, and Google have agreed to provide these systems and the complete setup with no charge for, I think it was 90 days at the beginning of the campaign. So you'd have to look at what that entails now. But there is an opportunity to take advantage of setting all of this up for free as a prototype currently.
I just want to let everyone know, Omar has asked whether the webinar would be available at this. I'm going to make some edits to this and then upload it to our YouTube channel. I will resend in the chat message. But you should look out for that maybe next week if you're looking for the recording.
And I'll just pile on that, Ali, if you don't mind. So if Ali manages to edit this down to like 15 minutes, then we'll definitely know that I was perhaps speaking a little too much or going over too many details. And if it turns out to be the entire 50, we'll have a good idea about the content. So Ali, do trim as needed. But please do respond back to Ali and us about what you saw and the level of detail that you saw. Because remember, if you don't say something, other people will be subjected to the same thing that just happened to you, right? So if you like it, thumbs up. If you think it was too detailed or went in different directions too much, please let us know so we can adjust future podcasts and other people will have a benefit from that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dan. And it looks like maybe a final, if there's any final, please ask them now in the chat. I'm just mentioned sent us that he just learned that Genesys Cloud orgs are not connected to this building, so there is an extra step to get to App Foundry licensing assigned to the org. I hope that I would read that aloud. If anyone has anything that, Jim, do you?
I don't. I got to read that again. Sorry.
Trevor, if you want, sorry everybody.
Trevor, just reach out to me directly after this. Thanks.
Okay, all right. So unless there are any last minute questions, thanks everybody for coming. This was awesome. Thanks Dan, Cliff, for joining us. And we will, Dan, you wanna close this out?
Yeah, I just, I hope you can tell we're very excited about this. It's a passion of ours. I think it's changed the way that companies are building bots. And learning about this is important because our competitors are going to be doing this in the future. This is where I think the world is going to because of the way how quickly the world is changing. So it's really a good tool to have under your belt. We're very proud of it, and just let us know what we can do to help, because I think it'll really be an advantage for you.
Okay, well, that's that. Hope everybody has a great rest of the day or evening, depending on your time zone. And feel free to reach to us, good, the bad, the ugly, requests, anything. We're here to help. So yeah, have a great rest of the day. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Allie. I appreciate it.
Very good. Thanks, Allie. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.